Welcome to the Barrier Breakdown, Disrupting Mental Health podcast, where we talk about the clinical and practical issues that face those working in the mental health industry.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Barrier Breakdown, Disrupting Mental Health. My name is Erin Molyneux-Bailey. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Cognitive Behavior Institute, and my co-host, Dr. Kevin Caridad, the CEO and owner of Cognitive Behavior Institute. This week, we have a very special guest on the show with us. Today, we are welcoming Ta'lor Pinkston. Ta'lor, who is joining us, is the creator of The Heart Advocate, which is designed to help all individuals, no matter of ethnicity, gender, or sexuality, to choose self-love as a coping skill for mental health and healing. The Heart Advocate provides individuals virtual self-love therapy, group workshops, and speaks about the importance of self-love in mental health. Ta'lor manages a virtual support group called Healing Over Everything, a safe space and community for self-worth, mental health, and healing. You can find The Heart Advocate on social media, where she shares how you can cope with mental health and heal with self-love. So Ta'lor, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you get interested in self-love?
Wow, thank you for the bio. Every time I'm hearing it, I'm like, ooh, I'm doing a lot of good work and I love it. A little bit about myself. I am a mother. I am, starting a journey and continuing in practicing self-love in my own life because of my motherhood journey. She was kind of the trigger to it all. And I found self-love through the Path of Self-Love School in 2016, and it has changed my life. I did not start the Heart Advocate. It actually wasn't even called the Heart Advocate when I first started. It was Ladyhood Journey is how I began, and it was a blog and a space where I vented and released 9 months of my depression that I experienced while pregnant with my daughter. So struggling with prenatal depression was kind of what drew me to want to know what self-love was. Everybody was buzzy. Everybody was talking about it. It was trendy, but it wasn't clear to me what it was. And Christine Arilo, through the Path of Self-Love School, really just opened that up and changed what it meant to truly love yourself, to build your worth, and how to actively practice it, because everybody's talking about it, but know how. So that is what 2015, 2016 was like. And from then it's just been growing into something I didn't even imagine at the beginning. I don't even know what else to say about that.
No, that's fantastic. I think that if you could maybe tell our listeners a little bit about what self-love means, I think that would probably, be a great conversation.
So self-love is a path, a practice, and a choice. So that's something that Christine says often. And she has some amazing literature. I actually have two of her books actually sitting with me. She spoke all over the world about self-love and what it means, but it's active choice that we make every single day to trust, show compassion, accept, respect, honor, take care of ourselves. And of course, it's an umbrella term. So there's so many things to talk about. And that's important because a lot of times it's a self-care focus only or a self-esteem focus only, but there's so many other ways that we can practice and choose to love ourselves. As somebody who's always been fairly confident in who I am, I believe that I can be, what I want to be. I didn't always trust myself, and I would overthink things And it took me a long time to make choices or to take risks on myself. And it wasn't until I found the path of self-love that I even understood that about myself. So the foundation of self-love is awareness and honesty. And being honest with ourselves and being able to be in a space of vulnerability and raw transparency with self and say, you know what, I'm sick of my crap. I am sick of allowing toxicity. I'm sick of settling, whatever it is, because we're all human and all deal with inner bullies and inner critics and negative thoughts about ourselves. And, I do not believe that mental health prioritizes self-love in a way that is tangible for people who are struggling with their mental health, which is why I think it's important to bring self-love into mental health. There's a lot of talk on self-esteem and self-care, but not a lot of talk on all of these other parts that are very much important and needed in the discussion around self-worth.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people kind of struggling. A lot of what you're saying, so it's really resonating with me, particularly as a clinician myself. I'm wondering what I find is most difficult, at least clients tell me, is that all makes sense, but they want the recipe, right? The very specifics. I'd be interested to hear, what are the specific recipes that you implement in yourself that you find helpful? You also talked about these negative thinking, and I'm curious, as a woman and as a woman of color, what are the things that have occurred over your lifespan that you think contributed to maybe that self-talk that's not helpful? And then in particular, during a pandemic, during the social situation that we have going on, the political and economic and all that, what do you think the unique stressors that are there? And what do you think you could then also suggest to others in a concrete way that would be helpful?
So I guess I'll start with my own personal journey and how noticing that I didn't love myself and that my own self-worth wasn't something that I was living and walking every day. So many things, obviously, being a person of color, there were barriers before I even knew that there were barriers. There's so many things that are embedded in the system that we live in that do not give us the opportunity to love ourselves. When you don't see yourself in the media, when you don't see, CEOs that look like you, it's kind of hard to see yourself in that same light. So the lack of self-worth and self-love in the BIPOC community is something that I am dedicated to because we weren't afforded the same privilege and opportunity to love ourselves. At the end of the day, like most things, self-love is a privilege. Self-care is a privilege. All of these things that we practice, unless you are born into an environment that gives you that information, that understanding, that space to be you, a lot of times we're not experiencing that as children. And I had two parents growing up in my household who both were very confident and driven and motivated and, quite frankly, bosses, and doing all that they could do to overcome their own barriers of, living in poverty and things like that, and want it different for myself and my sisters. But at the end of the day, I was still a femme, queer, questioning, I was in a very religious space where I didn't feel like I could always be me and that it wasn't okay to be me or to have certain feelings or thoughts. So you belittle yourself, or you hear things from family and friends that it's not okay to be this or to be that. And it chips away at your worth. It chips away at how you value your own life and see yourself as a sacred being and take care of yourself in that way. Of course, I know that I have privilege. I grew up with two parents. I grew up with, love. I grew up in a space that gave me the opportunity to have confidence, but I didn't always have this space to trust myself, or I didn't always know what was the best way to take care of myself. I learned what my parents learned. And if we go back in the history of African Americans in this country, we know that we weren't afforded the same opportunities and understanding and even just education. So at the end of the day, there's so many reasons, and I don't want to go, we could be here all day if we talk about all that. But through, growing up, going to high school, going to college, those were the moments that really showed me that I cared more about what others thought about me. I cared more about being in a relationship than I did my own needs, desires. And like I said, having my daughter really brought that to clear, like it just brought clarity to it, because she looks like me and I don't want her to ever question, doubt, herself, to always trust and believe that she knows what she needs, and to be empowered and to honor herself and to make choices that, are self-love choices, that are choices that are not because someone else thinks that you should. And I know you asked me 2 other questions, Kevin, so please help me out.
No, it's fine. I think, I've kind of always evolved. And as I'm listening, I'm thinking, wow, how powerful that is. It really talking a lot about the external environment, how oftentimes that acts as a mirror and can really be impactful on its influence on how we see ourselves. But pivoting from, as I hear you saying, what was important is that external environment to the internal environment, be able to see that, which is kind of what we could be blind to throughout our lifetime. We would just socialize like that. And having parents being that reflection of our internal self and kind of how that's helpful. I begin to think about, is there any one thing that you think was most important to you that one person can take away from today, maybe begin to look at their own internal reflection to really empower themselves moving forward? What do you think that would be?
So outside of the Heart Advocate, I'm also the Moving Beyond Depression therapist at Healthy Start Pittsburgh. And I provide cognitive behavioral therapy to prenatal and postpartum moms who are struggling with depression. It's awesome because I struggled with depression prenatally. So I know what that experience is like. One of the tools that I use, and I won't take credit for it, it's definitely Judith Beck, through the Cognitive Behavioral Institute. But I think it's so important, and it also connects to self-love because, like I said, awareness and honesty is the first step. And a lot of times when we're talking about going to therapy and things like that, that readiness is so important. And it involves this, I'm willing to do anything. And, I'm opening this up, at the very beginning. And you have to be honest, when you go to therapy. You got to tell your therapist what's happening. So one of the things that I like to begin with anyone that I work with is, what are you doing too much, too little of, and not at all? And just getting down to the baseline of being aware and honest of who you are right now, here in this moment, to call yourself out and to begin to look at, what can you be doing now? What can you commit to? What can you take, one step at a time and say, okay, I'm doing too much overthinking. How can I challenge that in the moment? How can I begin to slow myself down? How can I begin to pause? And just really picking those things out. It's a self-love practice, but it's a coping skill as well. So check-ins and things like that are something that I often do in my workshops and when I'm, conducting therapy with someone, because this is intimate work. This is heart work, as Christina Ryler would say. And it's very personal. And when someone is saying, I am ready to choose myself, it just gives them an opportunity to go in. And I think anyone who is, how do I get started? Start with you. Start with asking yourself the tough questions that you probably have been avoiding for some time. So Kevin, I hope that answers.
It does. As I sit here and think about all the great things you do, if there was one thing you think you could do to not maybe step it up is a poor choice of words, but to take it to the next level of doing the work you do, what would that be, you think? What is the need?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I see retreats and workshops like inside of communities of color that are, struggling with financial barriers, just anything that any group that doesn't have access to these services, any self-love therapist, self-love coach, there's a cost. You have to be able to afford to meet with me. And at the very beginning of my work, I provided free sessions, which is also why I have a free virtual support group, so people have access to me and access to this work if they can't afford it. But being able to be inside of a community, hosting big retreats and, self-love getaways, so to speak, but allowing people to be scholarshiped in is really like the ultimate dream for this work. I just know how powerful it is when we connect collectively. Of course, it's powerful, one-on-one, but there's something about being in the group space and doing this work. I have always wanted to give back, and I do my best, here and now, but also being a mother who has to support her child as well. But being able to give self-love to people who can't afford it is ultimately the dream.
Nice.
Is there anything, Ta'lor, that has surprised you as you've learned about self-love that you might want to share with our listeners? Something surprising you've learned?
It's a really great question. I think what continues to surprise me is that you can do the same work over and over again. I know that we live in a microwave society. People want results. It's one of the biggest struggles as a therapist. People come to you, they're like, fix me. You're not broken. You're not broken. Hold on. Let's start there. So a lot of times we want results. And with something so intimate, so vast, it's going to take time. We've been practicing a certain way our whole lives. We've been being taught something from the moment we have been born. And those lessons that we receive from these systems impact how we see ourselves. So over time, we've all been practicing something. So now we're bringing something new to the table with this self-love, and it does feel rebellious. It feels, very competing in a lot of ways, because a lot of this stuff is free, like too much, too little, not at all. There's so many little tangible practices that we all can be doing in our lives. Mirror work. There are things that I talk about on social media all the time that you don't have to spend any money to do. You just got to go into the bathroom and look into the mirror. So it feels rebellious in a lot of ways. And I think that it's important that we continue to talk about it and to continue to have these conversations. And as individuals begin to open it up for themselves, they begin to see that you can keep doing the same things. For example, that check-in that I gave earlier is something that I used to write it down and answer it for myself, but now I can say it out loud and actually call myself out in the moment. Because self-love is a path, a practice, and a choice, this journey we are on until we are no longer here. So we have the opportunity to practice forever. So a lot of the work that I teach and use in therapy, I absolutely am using in my own life, because I practice what I preach. Very much the non-traditional therapist who believes in storytelling, who believes in not, making it seem like I have never struggled with something. I'm very transparent in that way because I know the impact that has, especially on the BIPOC community. Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we storytell. It's how we heal. And if I shut that off, I'm shutting off an opportunity to really show someone how, to build that rapport in a different way. So I think it surprises me that you can continue to do the same work and it still be impactful, because we're always growing, we're always changing. There's always something that we can be working on. There's always something that can happen that can trigger us. Life doesn't stop just because we found self-love and now we're practicing self-love. So you can keep doing it. You can keep doing this work. And I have a program that I provide that gives you 12 sessions worth of hard work based on the Path of Self-Love School through my certification. And as long as you have the information, you can do it forever. So it's just, it's very unique in that way.
That's very cool. And where can our listeners find and others find information about your work and about your workshops and about your free virtual support groups and all the great and cool things you're doing?
Excuse me. I am definitely very active on Instagram and Facebook. Theheartadvocate.com is my website. How you can become a heart advocate is the services that I provide. So I have individual self-love therapy sessions and then also the individual program. When it comes to workshops, that is something that I do contracted out. So if a university or a group wants to have me conduct a workshop on self-care or self-love or, how to really use self-love in the BIPOC community. I've talked about many topics, even embedding self-love in mental health. I do that. I have not, prior to the pandemic, I was conducting workshops all over the city of Pittsburgh in person, but I have not been conducting my own workshops virtually just yet. 2021 may bring something different, but I'm on social media. Anything that I'm doing, I will be sharing out. I try to be very active. I'm definitely active in my virtual support group. So yeah, theheartadvocate.com. Always you can email me at theheartadvocate@gmail.com. Just for inquiry if you wanted to know more. But my website is also a blog. So there's self-love, mental health, and healing resources on there as well. And free self-love worksheets and activities that people can use if they, again, can't afford to necessarily go to therapy or, get the support that they need.
Wonderful. Those all sound like incredible resources. So thank you so much for sharing them with us and for this interview. What you are doing as part of bringing this kind of care and awareness is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today and for continuing to do what you do. We think it's incredible.
Yeah, thanks. It's awesome work.
You, Aaron and Kevin, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much to our listeners for joining us this week on the Barrier Breakdown, Disrupting Mental Health. As always, you can find out more information about our low-cost continuing education events for behavioral health clinicians at our website, which is www.cbicenterforeducation.com. Additionally, please do follow us on Facebook, CBI Center for Education, as well as Instagram at Cognitive Behavior Institute, where you can find information regarding Ta'lor's services as well today, as we'll share those with all of our listeners. And you can also find past and future episodes of The Barrier Breakdown, both on Spotify, Podbean, and Apple Podcasts, where we always do appreciate those to like our podcast so that others can also find it. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a safe and healthy week, and we will see you next week on the Barrier Breakdown. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Barrier Breakdown, Disrupting Mental Health podcast. Check out our website at cbicenterforeducation.com for more information and to learn about upcoming continuing education events.